Hi, my name is Sean Gold. Thank you for tuning into my first organized virtual panel. As my page is titled, I am an author and advocate. I do public speaking events on disability, advocacy, and accessibility. My disability is cerebral palsy, and I have a breathing tube. The purpose of the event is to finally have a space where people with disabilities and comprised health conditions can share our thoughts and experiences with this year of an electrician and global pandemic. This is not just a panel where it's all questions and answers. We would like this to be a conversation. We can ask other questions based on the topics and obviously add on whenever you feel the need to. My only request is for the panelists, if you want to respond to another panelist, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Also, please mute your mics when you're not talking to reduce background noise. I would like everyone on this panel to introduce themselves. Chanel Williams is going to be my voice tonight as well. So let's get to the meat of everything, guys, the pandemic. One of the obvious worldwide global issues of 2020 is the pandemic. The United States didn't get hit until earlier this year, and it seems to become a political advantage. As I've said earlier, my health is definitely comprised, and to see it now be played around with is infuriating to me. In my opinion, the country should still be shut down. I did understand why it has to open back up, but I don't think the guidelines to open up was good enough. People barely listen anyways. Many were rioting at the local offices, calling it unpa- unpatriotic to shut down the country. Before I go on, I want to hear from everyone how their experiences have been in this time. Whoever wants to go first.
I can't, Monica. Uh, that's really kind of scary for me because as you see, I have a condition that really has me compromised, and I try my best not to go out if I can. But of course, we still have to live our lives, and it frustrates me that they don't have any kind of I think mandate everyone wear a mask and some kind of line or something. Because even if you don't want to protect yourself, they should be concerned enough to protect others. That's it.
Yep.
Can I say um, that, sorry, my name is Chris Worth, and I'm a community member involved in CTI, it's a coalition here in St. Louis. But I know that we had at least one coalition member actually get COVID. And the reaction by the authorities, meaning the hospital, was kind of weird. You know who I'm talking about, Monica, Craig. So it's hit home in more ways than I expected. And although I think in some ways it's even the playing field. Muted.
Okay, so Sean is going to speak about his experience with the pandemic. My experience has been crazy. I did lose one family member to the virus a couple of months ago. There was a funeral that I obviously didn't go to. Even my best friend had it, and she's a nurse herself, and it ended up leaving permanent damage on her lungs, unfortunately. She's back at work still helping other patients. It's just been a year of the scary to know, sorry about that, guys, to not know that it may not disappear until the end of next year, supposedly, doesn't make it any less scary. I don't know if I believe the numbers anyway. I believe that it could be higher than they say because I don't think that any news outlet can be given an exact number of cases before more is added on. Or are they over exaggerating so that people take it more serious, even though that's clearly not working? Did anyone think that this pandemic would be over sooner than planned? Because I did. What's the real survival rate of this virus? Are we waiting for it to be over for for an exact percentage? Are we really expecting many people to trust this new vaccine ever? I don't feel safe getting it anytime soon. And my opinion on that is, I agree with some of the stuff you're saying. You're making a point, making a good point.
So
Luke?
my experience during sort of the pandemic and stuff is that I've actually been one of those what they would call frontline essential workers throughout this pandemic, working at a grocery store, as well as a direct support professional in my new job at Easter Seals Midwest. And so I've come in contact with a lot of people in and day out, just in the basis of work. But we always wear the face masks and stuff because personal responsibility is something that's very big, because if we're not safe and we go down, then everyone's going to get it, kind of thing. If one person gets it, we all get it. And so I've really had to sort of take that really standpoint. Also living with the autism spectrum disorder, it's really sort of interesting to see the high numbers of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, among other disabilities, that have actually gotten COVID in sort of the group homes and the nursing homes, to be exact, which really, I think, highlights a need for the money follows the person policy piece that allows people to live in the community through home and community-based services, which are still way underfunded policy-wise. And so I really think that a lot of this is really, even with this pandemic, it's really highlighting a lot of sort of the whole disability disrespect and disability neglect policy-wise that has been occurring for ages across the state and nationally. And in doing so, has put a lot of people at risk at the same time. Because if people were living in the community with their family or with their friends, they'd know who they're with. They wouldn't be in the large crowds. They'd be taken care of properly. And so they'd have a lower chance of actually getting COVID versus in the nursing homes where there's a lot of abuse and neglect that occurs, where healthcare isn't really taken seriously. People are getting sick and then they're infecting each other. And I also happen to be the Democratic nominee for Missouri State House of Representatives, District 89.
So my name is Julie Solly, and I am the executive director of the Coalition for Truth and Independence, CTI, which is a direct action, radical education, disability rights nonprofit org. And I'm also a pre-K through 8th grade Spanish teacher and classroom assistant. So the pandemic has really impacted me in a lot of different ways because I'm seeing the impacts of it from several different angles. From the disability perspective, I echo what Luke said about it bringing a lot of inequities and neglect to the forefront. I think that we are realizing those things are being called to our attention, and we're realizing that we have a long way to go. Along with that, though, I think that the fact that a lot of things have been virtual, Zoom has really become a thing. I think that's also really helped to streamline things and make them more accessible. I know that, like, for Chris and I, neither of us can drive, so having a virtual meeting or a virtual panel or a virtual whatever where we don't have to wrangle with transportation and we don't have to negotiate what time we're going to get there and who's going to pick us up and all of those things we don't have to plan.
All that bull crap.
All of that stuff, that has really made a lot easier, and a lot has become, it takes a lot less energy in a different way to be able to participate in things. And I think organizations who have previously said, like, oh, well, we could never do XYZ remotely, are realizing that, like, yes, in fact, you can. And that these things that in the past people had claimed were like just disability accommodations for just this group of people, which others people with disabilities are really things that are beneficial and helpful to everyone. So it really does help to equalize the playing field and reinforces definitions of disability being intersectional.
And accessibility.
Yes, and accessibility. And that accessibility isn't just something that's, like I said, that's like for a specific group of people, that everyone can benefit from it. And then from the teaching side of things, I'm seeing like how virtual learning and virtual classrooms and in-person learning, how they're all kind of working in tandem to both benefit and not benefit students, children. Being in a classroom this year is really, really, really different. It's challenging in different types of ways that I hadn't expected. And I really think my main complaint about it is that the amount of screen time that we're expecting during a global pandemic is unreasonable, but I also recognize that we're all doing the best we can, and that because we haven't been given any national plan, any real national guidance about how to do any of this, that's why these conversations are still happening. That's why these types of panel discussions are still necessary.
And that's why what Sean is doing tonight is radical.
Yes. So
And
yeah. So thank you, Sean. And I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to somebody else.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, well, hey, I'm Kyle, human service major. I just wanted to touch on, I agree with Sean. I think more so due to the pandemic, it's more so scary not knowing what's to come or to when it's even going to end. Also touching on the fact that he was speaking on the vaccination. I think that can trigger people's anxiety if they, suffer with that or any type of other like mental diagnosis they may have going on that causes triggers for anxiety, which would be a state of, I guess, like panic since we are in a, state of emergency. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. With this health pandemic, another pandemic, so to speak, was brought to my attention of Black Lives Matters. Black Lives Matter. Everyone knows about the unfortunate and completely unnecessary police brutality on Georgia Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Umaje McClain. I hope I said that right. And so many others. Why is it happening so easily? How come we have to keep protesting in order to be heard? This summer made me angry, and it opened my eyes as it did for the rest of the country that we are accepting it. Why is that? What you think, Kyle?
Um, I think once again, I agree with Sean. I think that the police brutalities, I mean, they're all unfortunate that's happened over the years, but I think that the ones that have happened so frequently is very scary, and it matches the fear as well as having to go through a pandemic. So with that being said, I can't speak on everyone's behalf of why we have to keep protesting and get our points across, but I do know if that's what we have to keep doing to get our points across, we'll have to keep doing that until we're heard, because the police brutality is just ridiculous. And I can firsthand say that I was tear gassed this summer at one of the protests. So yeah, so it was really, so standing up for other people's voices as well, got me, tear gassed. But that's what I want to do for my people, and I continue to do that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. Okay. Um. Hmm. I feel like have you ever just felt tired?
Mm-hmm.
It's more so you just feel tired.
Tired, yeah.
You just it's like you have no more energy to you will think you have no more energy until like, it happens again, and then it starts all over. Then
Mm-hmm.
but you will think you just have no more energy because you just get so tired and tired. And I feel like we repeating ourselves to the
Yeah.
point like I'm repeating myself over and over and over and over and over. Me as everybody. I feel like the difference though with this one is the Georgia Floyd one, how all 50 states was protesting. I don't know if you guys was aware of that. So this just didn't affect New York. This just didn't affect up north. This affected the world, the East Coast, West Coast, the South. Everybody protested. And it just wasn't black people either. It was all kinds of people. It didn't matter the religion. It didn't matter where you come from. And if you didn't know what was going on during that time, you had to be sleeping under a rock because
Mm,
everybody was standing up for what was going on.
mhm. Um, I wholeheartedly agree. And Sean, he just asked me a really good question. Did the tear gas harm me? It's crazy you say that, Sean, because I often think about when I got tear gas, and to say did it harm me, it most definitely did. It was a feeling that it was very very painful. And on top of that, prior months before that, I had LASIK eye surgery, so I had bad vision to begin with, and so my eyes were in the healing process. And so when the tear gas hit my eyes, it felt like lightning literally came down from the sky and bolted my eyes. And so from that tear gas actually harming my eyes, I have to do a follow up with my the surgeon that did my eyes, because for some reason my vision, it from that day getting tear gas, seems like it's like really like glossy and blurry, if that makes sense.
Oh my God.
Because I got hit with it front forward, like front, like right in the front, right in the front. And it felt like like lightning bolts came and just shocked my eyes. It was very painful, very painful. And I think it's affected my vision.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it's affected. It was, man, it was brutally painful. Like it just instantly just, you could just feel it. It's no joke. It's no joke. It's no joke. No joke.
Mm,
No joke. And so I think my vision is affected from that.
mm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get one more in. Anybody else?
I don't know.
I'm
So
thinking,
Go ahead.
for me as a white person, um, uh, especially as a passing white person, I, I I feel like it's my responsibility now to make sure that I'm raising up the voices of my black brothers and sisters, right? So I have a lot of privilege in my whiteness and a lot of privilege in my maleness, and so I feel like, especially right now, for people with disabilities who I know haven't always been included in things like protests, right? And in things like civil disobedience, right? I feel like it's my job, my place to step back and kind of sit my white ass down for a minute and give other people the sort of platform. But I think that I need to keep saying that because I don't see it happening very often. What do you think, Julie?
I think the question was, why do we have to keep doing what we're like? Why does this keep repeating itself, and why do we have to keep protesting? Put simply, we have to keep protesting because people aren't listening. It feels like the system wants to put a Band-Aid on the issue and say, oh, then it'll go away.
Yeah, just like was said earlier in the conversation, right?
Yeah. So it's like, if you say something that you want people to hear that's really important to you and people just ignore you, if you really want it done or said, then you're going to say it again.
And sometimes you got to tear shit up,
right,
in order to get heard, right? Sorry, Luke. Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. There's a comment in the chat that I think is really important. It says, Sean says, oh my God, Chris, white privilege but hard ableism.
I know.
So something that's important to the discussion of the whole Black Lives Matter movement from sort of a policy standpoint is we have this historical policy kind of movement of the over policing and over militarization of our police, where they give the police sort of the discards or the remnant gear that the military no longer uses. Something that people don't know is the use of tear gas is actually, when used against other nations and prisoners of war, it is actually illegal under the Geneva Convention. But when used against our own citizens, it is perfectly legal, which is super hypocritical currently. And so if you can't use it in war, why are we using it against our own citizens? And we see this time and time again where there's all these hypocritical kind of things where it's, sure, let's give them all this gear that they'll use against their own people and a purpose to oppress their own citizens from being able to speak up about the issues at hand in sort of a retaliatory way. The other thing that is really sort of interesting about this whole Black Lives Matter is we see it happen time and time again. It happens time and time again because there's no accountability for these officers. And no real, you don't see them be held accountable or written up. If people are doing similar, if people mess up at their own workplaces, they get written up and get reprimanded and stuff to the point where you can face termination. We don't see that with police officers. There's been many calls for defund the police. And the other side likes to say defund means $0 and 0 cents. When in reality, the $0 and 0 cents is nowhere near what we are talking about. What we are talking about is get rid of the militarized gear. We're talking about instead of having the police do everything, maybe have social workers and human services interact with the mental health stuff and the other cases, so that the police really only have to do the really more what we would call the violent offenses, such as homicides, murders, etc. And the stuff that really requires police to do. Their job duties, their job description is super big right now. They don't need all those tasks. So we need to figure out what tasks we can give to other entities that can assist the police. We need this really community-based way of looking at it where people with different skill sets are able to say, hey, I have this skill set. How can I help in this situation? Just like we see people get first aid trained or tourniquet trained or various health situations, and because we don't know if we're going to be near a medical emergency. We don't know if we're going to be near a traumatic bullet wound that needs direct pressure applied to it. And then when the moments happen, we're able to jump in and respond accordingly. But we're seeing this time and time again where the police are just responding to everything. And I don't really feel like they have the proper training, the proper skill sets to actually apply the right materials and tactics to the scene to do really trauma-informed healing to the communities.
Okay. No, Sean, I'm not married, but I have a niece and nephew that I have helped raise, and I fear for my nephew every day. I also have brothers that I fear for, because I do not anything to happen to them. And I just tell them and my brother, as soon as a cop come near you, or thoughts come to you, come to the door, get the video. Because something can happen to you and we'll never know what happened. They're quick to pull, they're quick to jump. And that is a big fear, because my brother had a run-in with a cop a few weeks ago, came to a door. And the cop moved and just demanded. And I was like, why didn't you video? Why didn't you video? Because anything could have happened. And we went to do. He was looking for somebody that did not live there anymore. And he just destined by a person. He was like, I know dinner and just ruining. I was like, oh my God. But I'm so glad that it ended peacefully. Peacefully. But that is a big worry to me. And I just get tired of seeing over and over again on videos. And if I could, I would be out there watching with them.
So we've also seen a lot of the ways that police interact with people with disabilities as well. And so something that has really sort of been coming to really sort of the front sort of thing is the police are required to actually provide accommodations to the disabled. There was a DOJ lawsuit several years ago, which the police tried to argue that they didn't have to provide disability accommodations to people with disabilities. And that lawsuit was actually an ADA case that was done through Department of Justice with the ARC of the US. And so something that's really sort of come to light, and that several disability organizations and people with disabilities are sort of trying to debate right now, is with the rise in policing, we've noticed that it's hard for police to necessarily know whether someone has a disability. And so something that's been really recommended to a lot of people is that we carry one of those medical ID bracelets or necklaces, or like an emergency notification card on us. And so I was wondering, and they say that those can sometimes help the police or EMS respond, because they then know kind of what your disability is and how to best sort of accommodate or help mitigate some of those external
Look, I do.
factors.
I hate to interrupt, but I am not for carrying ID that says I have a disability. Not because I don't think it. You could make it a medical bracelet, or it could be part of your brain, but it shouldn't specifically say what your disability is. Because that's just like Nazi Germany asking Jews to wear a yellow star on their jacket. I'm not doing that. I'll move to Switzerland before I will do that. And I don't have any money. So
I completely agree with you on everything you just said. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I think the only exception to that, and I agree completely too, I say the only exception to that is like blood sugar issues, like,
Then
you know,
put that on a medical bracelet.
right.
But it doesn't have to be this person has diabetes, this person has HIV, this
Right.
person has cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Excuse my language. I apologize. Sorry, Lou.
No, you're fine. I was throwing it out there because I'm seeing this big sort of push from these disability service providers. And personally, I don't really want to wear one, but at the same time, I'm trying to find ways that we can communicate our needs, what our external triggers are for us.
Exactly. I agree.
And so it's sort of that I'm sort of trying to find ways where we can communicate, hey, I need
Then the authorities
the lighting to be this way, or the sound to be this way, or these external stimuli need to be this, because otherwise it's going to mess with the autism.
Look, the authorities just need to be aware that they need to approach everyone with sensitivity, right? Right? Just like they shouldn't be using tear gas because they wouldn't do that in another country, right? They need to approach people not with the assumption that just because you're black, you're committing a crime, or just because you have a disability, you don't understand what they're saying.
When I think of the protest, I already knew that it wasn't going to last as long as it should have. Obviously, it's hard to when the climate keeps changing, and the pandemic is like a roller coaster of where it may be better one week, but then the numbers spike the next. There are still a lot of people who are, there are still a lot of people who are uninspired to vote in this election. Many feel like the Democrats nominated and voted in the weaker candidates. However, my concerns is even if, and hopefully when Biden wins the election, that he's going to do the minimal of revising all that Trump has done. Maybe put back what Obama did, and that's it. Why should young people or anyone be expired to vote, except for the fact that the current administration must be defeated? The disability vote. I've been working with the organization Rock the Vote to help get the importance of voting out. Once again, the echo on what I said a little while ago, there's hardly a motivation to go vote as a person with a disability. Besides the fact that the ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act, will be under attack, I feel like. We already know what this administration tried once to take away the rights. I'm concerned if they remain in the White House, that it will be taken away.
I completely agree with Sean. I feel like he makes a really good, valid point when he exercises the importance of voting, but at the same time, why some people might not feel inspired to vote due to what's going on with the pandemic in the country right now, and it feels like they're not giving. Why it kind of feels like to me like voting, even though it's very important to do, it's kind of doing the nation a favor. It's because they want us to vote, even though we need to vote. but they're not helping us with what's going on, you know, nationwide. So I get exactly what Sean's saying. I don't know if I'm voicing it out the correct way, but I get exactly what he's saying, and I feel the exact same way. So I really like that point that he just made.
I have to say that voting is like, I came up kind of an anarchist when I was younger, and I didn't really view voting as important. Just because, like like Sean has said, and the other panelist has said, I'm too far away to see everybody's name, so I apologize. But you know, it does get overwhelming. Like, if you're not going to do anything for me, why should I vote for somebody who's eating from the same trough as like the Democrats and Republicans? They all eat from the same trough, even if it's a gold trough compared to a bronze trough. You're in for, it's the same trough. So with that said, though, they expect us not to vote. I'm going to throw that in. I would venture to guess that those people, I almost said the F word, expect us not to vote, right? Because they're like, we're going to whip those people up into such anger, right, that they're gonna say, screw this because you're not helping me, which is totally natural. But it's a tool of the system to oppress us. And note that I'm not as oppressed as, say, Monica, right? So I just think that it's really important that we vote as a radical tool. You have to start seeing it as a radical tool. And that's what I started looking at it as. And I have to say that Sean is the president. He's the newly elected president of CTI. And he got the opportunity to work with a national voter rights organization because of his affiliation. So he's an awesome example of how powerful voting can be, I think, because people voted for him to be president of our little organization. So, I'm sorry I just lectured, but I'm a teacher, so that happens. I love being on this panel. I'm gonna.
Could I just add to that I think, like, it's really easy to say, well, why should I go out and vote when all this stuff is happening, and you know, I feel like I'm not being listened to anyway, and I'm very oppressed, and all of the narratives that we're being fed.
Or that are true.
Yeah.
Oppression is real.
Oppression is real. And I think that going back to whomever spoke about accountability earlier, if we're going to hold our police force accountable, and we're going to hold our elected officials in DC accountable eventually, and we're going to show that what we say matters, then part of that means we have to show up at the polls.
Or we have to run for office. Mm-hmm. like Luke here on the panel, another member of CTI. He decided to run for office, and people told him he could never do it, I'm sure. Right, Luke?
Yeah.
So you can change the world. All right, we're going to mute ourselves before we pop out of this wheelchair.
So something to remember is that there's a big argument that they always say issues make the vote. You gotta agitate to get out the vote. But at the same time, we have to realize that it's not guaranteed, which I think is a big trap that the party is falling into. The political party and the political machine is. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that there are other forms of voting available to us this year. We have the opportunity for absentee balloting and mail-in balloting if we request them early enough. And we follow the processes to return those ballots correctly. And as long as we follow the process of requesting and submitting them, the absentee or mail-in ballot is the same as a vote at the ballot box. People don't realize you don't actually have to go to the polling locations this year. You can actually vote from the comfort of your own home this year during the pandemic, which is interesting. And so we got to remember that there's many ways to vote and get our voices heard. And if we recognize where the disability vote is and how strong it is, something that people don't realize was in 2016, voter turnout nationwide was about maybe 61, 62% nationwide. But the disability vote in 2016 turnout was 31% of that. So of the people that voted in 2016, half of them were people with disabilities, which is much higher considering that the national average for people with disabilities is about 25. And so people don't realize just how much power the disability vote has in public office. Plus, just last year, we saw the Medicaid purges. We voted Medicaid expansion. Something to remember is that if we don't vote in politicians that want to influence the Medicaid implementation and implement it in the fullest extent possible, they could choose to not put funding to that if they so want for the cost sharing stuff.
Sean, you wanted us to unmute? Do we have a specific?
Okay, so on his outline, I have like
Okay.
pretty much. I'm gonna close up this conversation. It looks like I'm reaching the end. So is everybody ready for me to continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Mute.
Okay. So this leads, make sure you guys got me. Okay, yeah, I'm not muted. So this leads us to the next thing. The simple question is, what do we want? We're all in Missouri, so let's talk about state and federal. I'm honored to have a former representative here with us tonight. Hopefully, I'm not getting any titles wrong, so please forgive me if I am. This is mainly for us, the disability community. I know that we only represent a small portion, but every idea is worth hearing. For those of you watching live on Facebook, you can comment on your wants and I'll look through those later. Or we may say something now if we see them. Whoever wants to go first. And a few questions that Sean had, in case you guys want to piggyback off of the questions, the last questions that he have, by the way. The first thing I would like to see is some more programs like CDS, which stands for Care Direct Service, but for nurses. I know that there used to be one 5 years ago, I think. More transportation options. I'm not a fan of call a ride. More ways for people to afford wheelchairs, vans. This is going to be probably never again, but causes on disability. Anybody want to say anything, for about about that?
I can think of transportation as one Colorado example. I think it's about Friday and Colorado comes late. Now I live in Illinois, so I have to take two trains. And Colorado came late as usual. And I was sitting there, and when they finally showed up, the lift didn't work. So the man said, well, a good 30 minutes. I'm sitting outside of Chris's house, waiting 30 minutes while he mess around with the rail. And it never worked. And I had to wait for another one. So now I'm about 45 minutes to an hour late for my connection. I'm so scared that they left me. And I would have to take a train at 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, so come back up late, they're always rough with the ride. The same day, the driver that dropped me off, he hit a curve and threw me, my glasses, and everything all over the place. And it really hurt my shoulder. And I screamed, oh my God, that really hurt. It really hurts. He stopped the van, gets off, and looks at the van. Never said, you okay? You need assistance? He just looks at the van and gets back on and goes about business. So transportation, big, humongous issue for me. And hopefully we can get a plan to make Colorado better. Or find another form of transportation. I wish they had kind of competition, someone else, that we can depend on until that comes. We need to get them together.
And CTI had a campaign going before COVID, and we need to pick that back up. But Monica is the center of that campaign to reform I almost said reform COVID, to reform Colorado. And Luke's been added to that campaign a lot.
Something to note is that I live in my district that I'm running for is predominantly in sort of West County portion of St. Louis County. Around me, a lot of the public transit lines, I'm talking about the Metro Bus and Metrolink, which is sort of the main mode for those without disabilities. It takes almost 2.5 hours to get anywhere near me. And when we're doing some research into why it takes so long and why why the lines only go so far around near where I live, I was told it was from some people that knew kind of the history and sort of the policy development that was occurring at the time, was that they said that the politicians at the time said, we don't want those people. When they were talking about those people, they were really talking about more the racial divide, and the idea that they thought, it's just going to bring crime to our neighborhood, which we know is a flat out false. And so we see a lot of these issues that are still occurring in our society based on the ways that the systems were set up. And so we really need to really talk about really systemic-based change, systems-based change when it comes to this stuff. Because if people can't get around without a car, they're not going to be able to find work. Without work, you don't have money. Without money, you can't buy a house. Without a house, you can't live your life how you want to live it. And so we see all these issues that piggyback off of each other. And so really need to talk about systems change and how a lot of these issues are set up based off of another thing and how they all interact and interplay with each other. We have seen time and time again that students and people with disabilities are sort of pushed to sort of the sidelines, are pushed to sort of the back burner, are pushed sort of to the ways where they want us to be more invisible rather than be seen. There's federal laws out there that our state is not following actually correctly. And particularly we're seeing an issue with special ed, with the least restrictive environment criteria that students should be mainstream when possible. We're seeing Medicaid purges and Medicaid cutoffs. We're seeing
Luke, in the interest
sheltered workshop.
Luke, in the interest of time, I'm going to interrupt you because, not because we don't want to hear the rest of what you have to offer, but because Shaniel had to log off. So Sean has asked me to close us out. So in the interest of time, Sean, you can just answer me with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Were there any other questions for the panel that need to be answered? No. Okay. So why don't we go around and in closing out, any final comments? And we'll start with Monica. Is that cool with you, Sean? Okay.
My joint panel, and great to get it with people and discuss issues, and hopefully by doing these kind of panels, we can go out and make a difference.
Awesome. Okay, Kyle? You're muted.
I said I wanted to first of all say a special thanks to Sean for letting me be a part of the panel, as well as thank you guys for being a part of the panel, because I learned a lot today that I didn't know about certain disabilities. I often think when I have, because I suffer from mental diagnoses, I forget that even physical disabilities we're all tied in together. Mental, physical as well. So you guys put a lot of enlightenment on me, and hopefully we have another panel and we can get to talk more and get to know each other more. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm just really humbled to be invited to be on the panel. I really work every day to check my own privilege and to be a part of I think one of our strongest up and coming leaders, Sean Gold. Having him ask me to be a part of this was pretty amazing. And I'm just glad to be here and offer a little bit of my perspective with some very powerful people. All right. Thank you.
And Luke?
I think the biggest thing that we need to remember is the amount of power that we actually have to make the changes that we want to see for ourselves and for others. That people think, I'm just one voice, I can't do anything, when in fact they actually can. And so I think that having panels and things where we talk about various issues that are very much impacting the disability community and other communities as well through the intersectionality really sort of highlight a lot of the problems in society in a way that we are able to talk about them in order to address them.
Awesome. And I would also just like to say that I appreciate Sean inviting me to be on this panel. And I also want to apologize for the inconveniences, shall we say, of voice activation. We could not get our voice activation on this computer to go to sleep, so it was literally picking up everything that everyone was saying, and then it clumped it together into this huge message, which didn't make any real sense. So sorry about that, Sean. But
I'm sorry about that.
I really enjoyed being a part of this, hearing different perspectives, and having a unified platform to come together and talk about these things. I know that there have been other attempts to do this kind of thing and they've never really panned out. So I'm really, really grateful to Sean for making this happen.
Talk just a minute about being a person of color yourself.
Yeah. So most people don't know this because I can pass, which is a privilege that I have, but I am a person of color. My dad's family, his parents and grandparents were from Lebanon. So my dad's side of the family is very, very Lebanese when it comes to certain cultural things like food. But unfortunately, the younger generations, like my dad's generation, were never taught any of the language and were very, very Americanized when his parents came over. And so as a result of that, I've never learned Arabic, and I was only really taught to embrace American culture. But I am not white, and I recognize that I can pass for white and that I've been socialized as white, and so I have a lot of like intrinsic whiteness, if there is such a term. But
Fancy words.
Yeah, but like I really work to deal with those things, especially when I'm working alongside people of color. So just wanted to put that out there.